Should I move it closer? Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
We're a new addition to the family. So, Malacha, a new person.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get moving. So, Ayin Beis, Hemshchaim Beis, Chelik Aleph, Amud Tov Kof Hei, Tes Teves, Toshin Samaches. So we saw in Reish Yud the Indian Teves, and we differed between the Seder Audis in Kedusha and the Seder Audis in Liumaseh. Going to get to the highest of the clippers, and we said that was the purpose of the Ketores was to be Mavara, and eventually to be Mavatel, the Yud Aleph Sorin the Mitzabusa, which are the Iker Chayas of the clippers. And we saw that in the clippers was Dafke Yud Aleph. The Mashenkin Kedusha, we saw it was Esa Sfiras, Esa V'loi Teisha, Esa V'loi Chadusha. That the Indian Esa was Dafke. And we made the point that the Indian at a Sitra Achara, that the Chayas is mentioned as a separate Indian B'fnei Atzmai, since they and their Chayas are like Mudolim, Zemizeh, and Bapirut, Zemizeh. Mashenkin B'Kedusha, the Indian Chayas, and the Kelim and the Makablim and the Chayas of the Tachlis HaYichud, V'Yisachtas B'Yachad, therefore the Davke Eser, well, that's the Mishpah, the Spheres, Haraya, in Atzilus, in Kedusha, B'Tachlis HaKedusha, B'Ilama Elokus, that's Ilama Atzilut. And in the Sitra Achar, we saw that it's Yud Aleph, because the Bechina HaYud Aleph, that's the Makif of Laveina Zako, as we mentioned in the Samamone HaKetoras, and we saw that was Be'ika Makif, and since it was a Makif, therefore it stood B'Havdolah from the Makablim and Makif Aleihim, and yet that was Ika Chayusam, even though that's the case in Kedusha also, that the Ika Chayusam from the Makif, but later there's Nimshach Ahora from the Makif, but there are Penimiyas, but that's B'Tachlis HaYichud V'Yisachtas Ima Kelim, Ima Makablim, and Al Yidei de Bittel, they're also bottled with Klulim in the Makif. Mashekin in Liumazeh, due to the fact that there are Matzias, Liatzmo, and the Mufrodim for the Amitis Indian of Bittel, and therefore the Makif and they are two separate Inyonim. And due to the fact that there's no Bittel Amiti in their Marechas, in the whole Inyan, the spheres and the kelim, how they are in Klippa, and therefore the Makif remains a Dova Mudal, and it's counted as a separate Indian, and that is Ika Chiyusam, meaning whatever is Nimshut to them is not Nimshut, but there are Pnimius, how it is inclusion. And therefore there's no Ishachtis with the Makif. And so then we went on to say in Kedusha, however, it's not that way. And we described how the Inyonim of Chayas in Kedusha are B'Tachlis HaYichud V'Yisachtas Im HaMakablim. We got down on Amud Tov Kof Hei Be'erech a shlish away in the Amud. We said that Ike Achayas Hu Mephinas HaChochma Shezo Mephinas HaAleph Sheba Adam. Oliyil Shom Nisboa Shezehu Amayim Shoise Spashtas Adam V'chein Gabi Ahu Naviu which are brought down in the Pasuk Eliyahu. But that's the Chayas of the Spheres. That's the Oya Mislavish Nekelim. But the Spheres Ahu Naviu Nema Kemaya Da'ashke Li'ilona. In other words, we were talking here about the two Ike in Yonei HaChayas in Kedusha, which are Chochma and Bina, and we said that Bina was more Ayin of we're going to make that point now, that the Ayin of Bina is more how there comes a Matthias in Kedusha Gufa. It's a Matthias, but that's a Matthias Betela of Al Chaponim Ayin for Matthias. The Ila, the Ayin of Chochma is Bittel b'Matthias Lagamri. And that's the two Inyanim of Chochma and Bina. And we saw that the Ike, Mokia HaChayas was in Chochma, and the Ilo Bina was compared to the Inyan of the Dam. And we brought down that the Shem Eche, which is the Inyan from Bina, is the Rebua is the Inyan from Dam. And therefore we said that was that the Inyan from Chochma was nonetheless the Ika HaChayas, being as it is the Mayim which causes the Dam to be spashid and mistavev in the Evrei Aguf. And Imto, that the Inyan Adam is a medium, albeit, but it's a medium which is Korav Yesa to the Matthias of the Evarim. But the Inyan HaChochma, or that's the Mayim which causes the spashidus of the Matthias of the Dam in the Evarim, and therefore that's more the Inyan of the Aleph. The Ila, the Inyan from Bina is Dam, but that's the Klal Shema Adam, Aleph Dam. That's where we were holding. The Klal Shneihem and Davki, both of these Inyanim together. The Ayin both Chochma and Bina Nikroim Adam. Over Proteus Hein Beis Min Chayas. The Achayas, that's Klolis, they both of them are Adam. However, in detail, we can divide them into two Inyanim. The Achayas to Bina, Uli Yesh Bechinas HaMetzius. Like we said before, albeit a Metzius of Kedusha, a Metzius Betela, Al Chaponim Ayin Shal Metzius, V'Achayas to Chochma, Uli Yesh Betela, Bittel HaMetzius. In other words, the Inyan of Chochma is nimshach into the Inyan of Bina and causes in the Dam, and Mamela in Koyach HaBina had is Mitzad the Koyach, the Inyan from Bittel b'Metzias. In other words, instead of being Bittel, but Derech HaInyan shall Bitlayesh, or Al Chaponim, a high form of Bitlayesh, it becomes Manish Bottle b'Metzias. Why must Kosev L'Kutei Torah Ba'abir de B'shar Shehikdimo V'ayin Mashi Yisbor Liyu Perek, and he brings at the bottom there Perek Tov. Excuse me, Perek Tov Tara. V'zehu B'chinas Adam Pnimi Shehu B'chinas Ha'er V'Achayas. So all we've been talking about up to now is the Etzem Oyer V'Achayas, not the yichud of the chayas mit the makablim, not the, like we described briefly in the last year. Mitzvah ha'adam is not only his chayas, but how the chayas is mislavish in the guf. In other words, the mitzvah ha'adam is the chayas and the makabel, which is the guf. Davke b'yichud shneim is called adam. Ki a guf b'fnei atzmi is not a guf, is not a adam. It's a guf, it's not a adam, and the chayas b'fnei atzmi is also not a adam. Davke b'yichud shneim b'yachad. So we've been talking up to now, you used the expression out of dam and the inyan from adam, but we're talking more in the inyan achayas. And when we say the inyan from bittel and bittel b'metzias and bittel ayesh, we're talking in the etzem chayas itself. There are two efanim. So when we're talking here about the mailer, the yichud and the bittel, the chayas, we mean the bittul of the chayas peshur shoy. In other words, the gilui of the chayas is in such a even that it's megaled its own bittul to its shurish. In other words, that the inyan from chokhmah is the inyan from bittul in the shalamayla mi chokhmah, the bittul of the etzem nefesh. The inyan from bina is in the same way. Just that bina reveals the bittul in a way which only makes it possible for it to be nimshach in a form of chayas to a matzias, kol shehi. But chokhmah is the immediate inyan from bittul. But that's all bentayim of what we call the inyan from adam pnimi, shuhu b'chinas ha'oyer v'chayis. That's for the time being not talking about the emes yichud, how it comes into the kelim, but talking in the chayas itself, kufa. So therefore we have to say that the chayas how it's nimshach from the shoyresh is also a min makabel azamin. In other words, the shoyresh kol chayas, but that's the immediate nefesh, and then chokhmah is nimshach from the nefesh by even bittul man, not only from matzias. For ilul bina is how it's nimshach the chayas atzmei in a way that can be mishyachis to a matzias. That's the union of Adam Pnimi, but that's the Erev Achayis Atzmai. And now he said, Bislapshus o Erev Achayis, Bakelim, Veivorim, the Zohar, Nikru B'chinas Adam Ho'elyei. Al Shem is Kalulus, the Ereis V'chelim. The Shneihem Yachad Davke Nikroim B'Shem Adam. In other words, up to now we've been using Adam only, B'Pnimi so Inyan, the Ainu Achayis. And in that gufa we can find a yachas in the chayas gufa to a inyan from dam and to a inyan from aleph. Just like we see that the dam is a matzias, but nonetheless the dam is only the chayas. The dam b'fnei atzmei is not anything, only when it's nimshach into the evorim. But nonetheless the dam, the eikshehu b'atzmei, is a inyan of bittul, and it's a inyan from dam ha'odam, because the bittul klape the etzem nefesh, and particularly etzem makabel from the inyan amayim, which is the inyan from chokhmah. But when the dam is mislavish in the evorim, all a mile, how the Erev Achayis is nimshach into all the kelim, and you have the yiskalulus and the yichud and the eres with the kelim, that's the emes inyan from them. That's the immediate shem adam, and that's not adam pnimi, no, that's adam stam. So the immediate adam, and he calls that the inyan from adam ha'elyon, the klolos inyan of elam ha'atzilus. Al Shem is kalulus ha'eres v'chelim. That the Shneihem Yachad Davke Nikoyim B'Shem Adam. V'hainu, Mepnei Sha'oyer V'achayis Mishyachad Imohem B'yichud Goma Ad She'im Dova Echad Mamish. In other words, why is it Davke B'yichud Achayis of Adam Pnimi with the Adam Achiteni, which is the Inyan HaKelim? Why is that Adam Stam? Why is that the immediate Inyan from Adam? Because Davke, when the two of them are B'yichud, in the highest yichud that we can gain and we can imagine, Davke, that's the inyan of Adam. And the yichud is in even that the dover echad mamish. And as we'll see later on when we come to the gufa Adam, we'll see that the dam and the Adam become mamish one matzias. V'hainu, Meisha ha'oyer v'achayis misyachid imohem b'yichud goma Asher ukamayma iyo v'garmoy chad shehein b'chinas chad mamish. Now why does he choose the second lashon iyo v'garmoy? Because he's talking about the islapshes and the yichud are the earths with the kelim. In other words, what we described before is adam pnimi, the yichud the oiros with the mokeh, with the elakus, how he is lamayla mi'oiros, how he's mokeh ha'oiros, that's a yuvachayeu chad. That's what we call adam pnimi. So even lamata in the adam, that's the inyan from the mayim adam. That's the inyan of the chayes, how it's nimshach from the etzem and nefesh in a form of yichud, atzmi, what that's it called, yuvachayeu afil lavi the adam. Lamayla, that's the yichud of the oiros, Lashon Rabim with the Mokeh ha'eres, but that's a Lamayla me'atzilos. And that's Iyuv Chayev Chad. We're talking about now how the Earth Mishyachid and Nimshach into the Kalim. And that's the Inyan van Adam Stam. The Amitis Inyan van Adam, then that's Stavki Iyuv Gamoyi, because that's when the Earth are Mislavish in the Makabel, how he is Adova, Matthias Ki'ilu, that is Bifnei Atzmai. And Alidei the Amshocha of the Earth, Betoichlam, then instead of being a Matthias Le Atzmam, they become Chad Mamish. And therefore that's the Indian of how EU is Mishyachad im Gamoyi. What Gamoya means the Kalim. Is Ein Ze Beginnes where are we? Mamish Gamoya EU Gamoya Chad, Shein Beginnes Chad Mamish. Ve'agam Shein Adoima La Yichud De EU V'Chayeyu. Why would we say that the Emerson van Adam, the Stavki EU Gamoya Chad? That's a long madrega. Because as we pointed out, the immediate Adam is Davki when the lowest Madrega, the Kalim, what we'll see, Eitel Adam Lamata, the Goof, becomes Mishyachid with the Earth, that's Emerson Inyan Adam. And therefore there's a higher Inyan, which is not the immediate Adam, even though it's what we call Adam Pnimi, and that's the Yuva Chayeyu, the Lichud of the Chayes and the Earth with the U. That's a higher form of Yichud. That's what he said, it's not to be compared. The Yichud of the Kalim with the Yichud of the Earth. He said, Ein Ze Beginnes Madrege Zu Atzmai, the Beginnes EU Shemisyachadim Chai Chayeyu. He said that EU, which is Mishyachid with the Gamoyu, is another EU. And therefore we divide it into two statements, as you all know. We say EU Chayeyu Chad, and we say EU Gamoyu Chad. We could have just said EU Chayeyu Gamoyu Chad. Well, then we would have understood that the Chayeyu and the Gamoyu are two levels, two inyanim. But it would have been moving that the EU is more or less, I'll upon him, the same, for all purposes of Gila, it's the same Madrega. So there was a derivative. That's not the case. That what we call EU, which is Meshyachid with Chayeyu, this is another Inyan in EU. In other words, that's another Mochi V'Shoirish in Lamaila Me'atzilas, that's Meshyachid with the Oiros, and that which is Mishyachid with the Kalim is another Inyan in EU. It's a lower Madrega, and it's a Ha'ora from the first EU. And nonetheless, like Gabi Inyoneinu, well, we want to talk about the Amitis Adam, that we kill all the Madregas Biyachid, what that's the Din of an Adam Kiyadua, and therefore we have to have, despite the fact that in EU it's a Yerida, but nonetheless, it's still Mishyachid B'tachas HaYichud, with the Dova HaNifrat Lafiyah, but that's a the Gamoyi. And that's what he said, Ein Adoima, La Yichud De EU V'Chayeyu, V'gam, even more than that, he says, the Inyan van the EU, Shemishyachid im Gamoyi, Ein Ze Beginnes Madrege Zu Atzmai, the Beginnes EU, Shemishyachid im Chayeyi. And that's what we said. That's moving from the two Lashenes, from the two Beginnes of EU, which is clearly separately one from the other. The question is where? The EU Perikuf Nun, hey. Well, he writes over there, he says, Zeo B'chinas ha'oyer amislabish, v'ayichud hu rak le'inyan ha'isavas, she'ein ze yichud atzmei, ki im l'tzeirach eze pa'ula, hainu lifoyel pa'ulas ha'isavas. Now that's referring to the famous lesson of the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of the famous Igeras, Kodesh, chapter 20, Iya v'chayev, chad iya v'gam, moye chad. Well, over there he talks about the Din and the Yichud of Iyum with the Kalim and with the Oiros for Churu. It's a very famous Igeras for Ribui Ha'inyonim, for Ribui Ha'Yeseidas in Havana Pnimis when I get to the spheres for Churu. However, the Alter Rebbe says over there that for the sake of being Mahava Yesh Mi'ayin, but that's the immediate Inyan of the Yisavas, and the Yichud Eliam, which causes that Isavas, B'derach Yesh Mi'ayin, is Davke the Yichud of EU mit Gamoy. Davke the Yichud of EU with Gamoy. Huh? He Samira, the Alter Rebbe says over there that the whole necessity or the whole Ikar of the Yichud of Iyu mit Kamoihi, the Yichud of the earth mit the Kelim, is to bring to the Indian the Yisavas Yesh Miyayim. He says that that's what the Eivish is Mishyachid with the Kelim Kedei Lifel Yisavas Yesh Miyayim. That's what he writes over. Among Ranim Tzelafi said that the Ikar Yichud of Iyu mit Kamoihu is a Pu'ula. The Ikar Kavana is to bring to the Indian of Yisavas. And why is that called Pu'ula? Ki kol dova nifal michutz laha'etzem, or that's called Pu'ula. Wherever an etzem, I know if we take the mensch, Indian from Pu'ula is Davke Zach what he does in the Oilam and in the Inyanim which are chutz li atzmusay. Or Inyanim what he does betoich atzmusay. I feel the Indian from his boniness. Yeah, I feel Inyanim which he uses, the koiches hanefesh. Or to be megala certain inyanim b'toich atzmi which have an effect on other koiches in the nefesh, but they're not called piula. It's not right to say that he made a piula b'atzmi, that he was metaking amida musayemas alidei. I mean, maybe in a borrowed language you could say that, but it's a lot of Russian meduyak. No, the inyan from piula is dafki michutz la ha'etzem. Yeah, therefore, the inyan from Yisavas Yesh Miyayin is called over there. The Alter Rebbe called it Russian Pu'ula. I said the Rebbe Nimtzelafi that the Ike Yichud of the Iyu mit the Gamoyu is really for Dova Michutz La'etzem, what that's called Pu'ula, and in this Indian it's the Indian Pu'ula Sahi Yisavas Yesh Miyayin. What Lamaila, that's the one and only thing that can be described as Piula, because otherwise everything else is Kol V'Teich Atzmusay. The one and only Pu'ula Kaviyocha from the Eivish is where he makes the Dovish Chutz Mimeno, or Al Chapani it looks to be Chutz Mimeno. This was a Sis B'yemet, I feel it does like Mish B'yemet. And if the Yichud Elyon which brings to that, and that's what he says over there in Pek Kuf Nun Hey, therefore he calls the Iyu which brings about through the Yichud with Kamoyah, the Yisavas, he calls it Oyer Mishlabish. In other words, that's already a Oyer which is entered into the Lavush, Almanas Lifel Ashu Alidei the Inyan from the Lavush. But that's B'derakla, when we use the word Islapshus, we also have a Zah Inyan in mind, and it's a Kavana that we say that something was Mislabish in something, in other words, to put on a Lavush. Why do you put on a Lavush? In order to, as you even go outside yourself. That's why you have the Inyan Lavush. If we could be a Lu Yitzuya, that the autumn would just be Le'atzmai, the Kolas Man completely levad, then maybe he would need the Inyan from the Lavushim, Al Chaponim, Tmidius or Biatzmius, like he does have to have the meaning from Lavushim. So the whole meaning from Lavushim is Almanas, that he should be able to be Nimshach, or Al Chaponim, Afilu be Poel Chutzle Atzmai. And therefore, over there, the Rebbe uses the expression that the Iyu, which is Mislabish, in Chayeyu is the Oyer Misla, in Garmoyi is the Oyer Mislabish. Because in Yonehu is that Yichud is Rakli Inyan HaYisavas. She'ein ze Yichud Atzmi, ki im L'tzoyrech Eze Pu'ula. If I mean, Yichud Atzmi is where the Etzem is Mishyachid with something, and the Etzem remains B'Shlei Musa, as a Etzem, despite the fact it's been Mishyachid with a certain meaning. That's in the Chayeyu. The Inyan from the Oilers, in Yonim is what Gilu HaEtzem, and in Gilu HaEtzem Gufa in the highest Madrege. Just the Inyan from Gilu HaEtzem Kipshutei, Mami. And therefore the Etzem remains B'Shlei Musa, and it's not try to call that a Lavush Kol Shehu. And therefore that's called Iyuva, Chayeyu, Mashenkin, and Iyuva, Gamoihi. So it says the Rebbe Yesh Leima, the Bekelim Gufa, Ayichud B'Pchinas Pnimius HaKeilim, Zer B'Pchinas Odom Alav Dam, and we called that before even Odom Pnimi. So therefore said the Rebbe suggests that in the Keilim Gufa, it depends what level in the Keilim Hamaduva. If you talk about the Pnimis HaKeilim, then there Yichud with the Oiros is Al Derech with the Yichud with the Oiros Atzmo. And that can't really be called Iyuva Gamoihi. It can only be called Iyuva Chayehu. Or Al Chaponim, it's Korev Yesa to Iyuva Chayehu more than it is to Iyuva Hayu. Therefore, that's what we called before the inyan from Aleph Tam, the inyan from Adam Pnimi. Well, that's the inyan of the Chayas. And as well not brought down and considers the Pnimius or the Kalim, called inyanim is only Litayer as inyan oer, not legalis, not to as it were be Matayer inyan oer. In other words, to give the oer a certain tiur, what is one on it. The inyan from Shematoya is Mataya the etzem from the Zaki. That's alter in inyan from Girei etzem. If you say I'm out of mention, he's a chocham, but that's a Shematoya, then you mean that his etzem is a certain etzem miyuchad le'inyan masuya, which is called chochma. When you talk about Shemus Apiula, for example, then you say he's a carpenter or a tailor, you talk about his koyach only to be mamshik certain chayas in the dvarim chutz miyat. However, that's in what we call Shema Toya, and that's in from Pnimis HaKelim, or that's Al Derech V'Iyur V'Chayeyu. Who Pnimis Adam Pnimi, like we said before, in Achayus. Who Ma Shahin, Be'etzem Kelim L'Kabel. That's a Pnimis HaKelim, the Indian is only to be Makabel the oil, not to do anything with it, but just to be Megala certain inyanim in the oil, which is still B'yichud Im HaEtzem. V'yichud Anal, that what we talk Ge'ir V'Gamoihi, Hu B'chinas Chitonius HaKelim. And that's called a Vorim Dezor. That's what we say, that the Ramach, a Vorim Demalke, like the Alter Rebbe calls it in Tanya, in Perek Dalet. But over there he's talking about the Pu'ula, the mitzvahs, when the mention Mekayim mitzvahs, but Mamish Lamata, so then there's a goof which is Mekayim the mitzvah, which does Bepua, the Inyan Toich and Pnimi of the mitzvah. So Lamaila, that's the Inyan of Kelim, how they are in Chitonius Kelim, and they're called a Vorim. What Eva is already a Gilui, but Chitonius Mamish, Almanas, Ifel Inyan Masuya. So therefore, that's called Kelim by Vorim Tezor. And yet, nonetheless, in that Inyan of his Shabbos, and in that Oifen, where there is to be poiled, the Inyan of his Shabbos, there's also the Inyan of Kiyam HaMitzvahs, but that's like the Pnimius Kavona in the Inyan of his Shabbos. Olafizeh, U'Bechinas HaOras Ihu Levad. In other words, it's not the Amitisa Ihu, like we said before. It's another level in Ihu, which is Gabi the Emesa Ihu, which is the Inyan of the Oiras, the Moke of the Oiras, then the Ihu, which is Mislavish in the Kelim, Chitanium, or that's only a Ha'ora Bilvad. But nonetheless, Klolos, it's still Ihu. It's still Mamish, the Inyan of Elakus Mamish. This is the Moke Amiti, Bain from the Eretz and Bain from the Eretz, and Mislabshim indicating. So what it comes out of is that the Inyan from Odom, that we call Hitisa Odom, is Dafki these colorless of, or the Yichud of the Eretz with the Kelim, and albeit that's a lower level, going to get to Chitania Kelim, and begin to get to Kelim Mamish, what we need Kelim as a Inyan, to be pale a certain Inyan, but that's already a horrible vad, from the EU of an analyst, EU Vagameu Chad, the EU and the Chitonius HaKelim, the Chayas HaNimshuk Bem, or the Oyer HaMislavish Bohem, and them Abatachas HaYichud. In other words, we're only pointing out that there's different targets in the Inyan HaYichud. Of a so it's all Chad, that's EU Vachayer Chad, that's EU Vagamoihi. Omikol Mokim Haria Oya Mishyachet Mamish Ima Kelim. I feel with those Chitonius HaKelim, with the Evarim, for that Ha'ora Bilvad, albeit. But nonetheless, it's Mishyachet Mamish with the Kelim, Ad Shagam HaKelim, Heim B'Phinas Kiyum Atzmi, Mitzad Yichud Ha'er Shabahem, Achamish Kosim B'Mochim Acher, Shezei Inyan Hu Kayam, Ushmoi Kayam, V'chisoi Nochoim. Was Hu Kayam, or that refers to the Kol Mamish Be'atzmet. For all purposes, that's referring to the Atzmet. Shmoi Kayam, or that's the Animshik Mi Atzmet, as you do, what the Rizal calls it the Shehoyah Mamalas Kol HaMatzias, that was also prior to the Inyan from the Isavas, prior to the Inyan Al-Tzimtzum, That's called Shmoi Kayom, and also Chisei Nochein. Yeah, he's Kisei, but that already indicates that Dora moved out. I think that he sits down on it. Kaviyoch, it's already Ayin moved to Mimeno. Nonetheless, we say that's also Nochein. Even though we don't say Kayom like we do by Hu Kayom or Shmoi Kayom, or the fact that they're all linked together with the Vovim, Hu Kayam, U Shmoi Kayam, V'chisa Inochim, well, that's a sign that Sof Kol Sof, yeah, they're all the same Oifan, even though there's different dargas in it. Tegam HaKisei, Shein HaKelim, Shein B'chinas Mochein L'Shiftoi Barach, Areihem B'chinas Kiyum Bi Eter. Now, what does that mean? So we see that what do you mean with the word nochein? The word nochein, he teaches b'derech mochein. Yeah, what mochein means, how they call it, a place of dwelling, a place where Indian mummies dwells, begolui. That's called it's machon. Teach that the word nochein from Russian mochein. So that's kayom, and this is kayom, and this is a mochein to the same meaning. So, albeit that indicates, like we saw before, a certain ha'ora bilvad, because the EU in that level is only a ha'ora, mesuyim is, it's only a ha'ora. Of sof kol sof, it's all one bracket together with hu kayam, shmai kayam, v'chisei nochei. However, what's the pitch line? What does he mean? He says that those inyonim are bekiyum atzmi. Now, we should mind to mitem, this is a famous idiom which occurs in certain places, and it says, it's spoken about with great detail. It's, and here the Rebbe just mentions it in even in Kita Haloshim. Yeah, therefore, we won't be able to deal with it. Kol our Majesty Varidas, it would have been maybe due to the Inyan. What we mean is like this: that we say that it's not really shaykh cholila to say about the oyer akol bi'atzmusay, just like it's shaykh to atzmusay to say that is a chayz which is tolui be'ezi inyan. You can't say chas v'shon dei which is tolui in it. But we say in like the Alter Rebbe brings over there in that famous Igeres, who yelvade bekoiche v'yacholtei yelahavis as a yesh meyayin v'echzamukla. Why? Because who bi'atzmusay ve'ena olo mishum dova v'siba hakodma lo yizborach. He's what he is. Yeah. And that's what we call a kiyum atzmi, something that its kiyum is purely mitzad its own. So what the chiddush is that the oirois araya biamitis ayichud with the atzmas, even though they have a beginning, that's the whole thing. Even though yesh lehem, yes, kodmo maher there was a time when they didn't exist. So they're only totally in the atzmas of magalo esam. Nonetheless, we say that mitzad the yichud that they have with the atzmas, they become like him, and they, as it were, from the moment that the Eibush revealed them, they become in his eyes that they are levitic mitzad atzmam. They have what's called kiyum atzmi. Yeah, even with, if we can imagine that the atzmas wouldn't be there, they would still be there. In other words, that they have that Indian from chayes mitzad atzmam. Either Rambam writes, the kulam tzrichim lo yizbar v'hu eina. Tzrichim u'ein tzorich la'af echad mehem. That means that Indian is only shaykh on the atzmas, not on shum dova abor mimeno. Or this is the chiddush. It's not the fact that the oyer is dovuk b'hamoya, even from dveikis ad kedikata. We say it's had, and therefore it becomes mamish ayin what's called kiyamatri. That's a pele nifla. So you might have said, okay, you want to be mechadish as amintzot musag of a thing having kiyum mitzad etzem atzmusay, just like the atzmas mitzad the dveikis and yichud in the atzmas. You could only say that about the oiros. And therefore, comes again the Rebbe and he says, Hu kayam, u shmoi kayam, v'chisei nochein. Since they're all written in one inyan, from that we see that even the dova which appears to be a dova nivdal. Now, why do I say appears? Because we're going to see as we go along that even the kelim you can't really say they're a dova nivdal. They only appear to be. Even in pashtus inyan, they're not really a dova nivdal. They appear to be a dova nivdal. They have a function which is different than the oiras. Let's put it that way. Says the Rebbe, nonetheless, even the Kalim, particularly Mitzad, the Kalim of Atzilus, in Olam HaAchtus and Olam HaElakus, Mitzad der Yichud, even with that EU, which is a horrible one from the Amitis EU, even there you still have the Indian from Kiyum Atzmi, that they are Kayum after they are Miskala from the Atzmas in the same way that he is Kayum. Well, that's a Chiddush Gadol and Smavur. But if you want to look it up in this mind what the Rebbe brings down here in the brackets, B'yom Simchas from Reish Nun Vav, and in the Frierdiker Rebbe in the famous Hemshech of Tov Reish Tzadik Daled, the Rebbe goes into the whole Indian Barichas over there. That's one on that some of the Chassidim complained that Hemshech was so hard that they couldn't keep up with it. The rest of the Maas was given. That was after the Rebbe was already at that time already in the household. He was his chasna was in Tov Reish Teves. This was in Tov Reish Tzadik Daled. So the Rebbe happened to be at that time in the household of the Frierdiker Rebbe when that Hemshech was being said. And the Chassidim wrote in a letter. It's just so complex and so quick. The whole Hemshech, all these Marim that are tough for them to be Makabel. So I feel the Chassidim wrote in, and the Rebbe was just so briggish that he wanted to take all the heads and break them together. And the Rebbe was tremendously upset. How dare you write in and say, we're in the middle of being Makabel from the Moya, the Zolcha Inyani was never being in what you might call the Teil Sayomim from the Giluim, even though these Inyanim appear in places in the Rebbe, Nishmas Ayin, over the Even Abir that was going on at that time. And nonetheless, some Chachomim Lebeineim wrote in as Amintach. The Rebbe was prepared to, how do you call it, bang heads together in a way. So he was furious and expressed his fury to some of the Chassidim and so on.
What was the result?
I don't know. The result was that the Frierdiker Rebbe stopped. After a certain point, you see the whole Hemshech stops. It says, Ad kan, v'loi nitan yosel lahati. And that's what got the Rebbe angry. The fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe was put off by the whole letter, and he stopped the whole Hemshech. And the other Maimorim from that year are a different sort of Maimorim altogether. If you read it, you'll see it. In Tzadik David, if you look at it, you'll see it. All the way through after you just Kislev, into about this time of the year, the Maimorim, after and they talk about this in it, Mamash. Arish is in the floor. All of a sudden, boom, stop. And then there's a break, and then the Maimorim after that, much more, these sort of so-called, Aveda Dikir Balabati is a type of Maimorim, so cool. Al-Khafanim says the Rebbe, Ukemoi Benishon that the Kalim Mitzad the Yichud with the EU, even albeit with all the drawback we saw, drawbacks, with the being at only a Ha'or of Chulu, nonetheless they're Bekiyum Be'etzem. And now he brings another Dugma, Lazeh, Ukemoi Benishomes. Oh no, here's another, over there the Frierdiker Rebbe also touches on that whole union, that the Nishomes are also Bekiyum Atzmi. In other words, even the neshama, how it is, lamata, bislabshis in a goof, mitzad shershei, the neshama is what's called a kiyum atmi. The neshama has a certain, what you might call, eternity and independence in its own Indian being what it is. And what is it? Where's it nimshul from, the neshama, according to the Alter Rebbe over there? In the famous Igeras from Pnimius ha-Keilim, that the neshama is a nimshul. Begiluyim letoich ha'olam es mipnimius ha'kelim da atzila. Since they're from pnimius ha'kelim, they even fit yuva chayeyu chad, not just yuva gameyu. Therefore, they're for sure, and even fit hu kayam hu shmoi kayom. They have an inyan for kiyum atzmi, which means that the neshama, wherever she is and whatever may be her matzav, there's a certain inyan in the neshama of independent eternity, as you might say. That just the neshama kamoy shehu has a certain kiyum atzmi, how she is as the neshama. Even if we'll say that she's been nifra, like he writes over there, the Lashon, the Alter Rebbe, kva nifra du mi pnimis ha'kelim. וכמוי בנשומס תכסיב ואתם הדבקים בהשם אלוקיכם חיים כולכם hayim. Well, from different statement that's not stam dveikim. No, that means dveikim in the sense like a ha'ora atzmi is dovok in a tzetzer. Mami. A few what you tell me say. Amamer that's a dveikim gor and a peledik noifen. Well, that causes the chayim kulchem hayim. Yeah, that you're all chayim. So the famous deal, and that is was it the Kiddush? Moshe Rabbeinu looking at everybody's standing there, and he says, "Chaim kulchem hayim, you're all alive." Borash is ekach. So I mean, in Pashtus, what he means to say is that Rahman and Tzlana could have been otherwise, and give a cook, Baruch Hashem, Chaim kulchem hayim. Of a Pnimis Adova, Meroi Pshitas Ayin, we say that. Chaim, Kulchem Hayim, you guys are Chaim and Azamin Oven from Dveikim B'Hashem Elokeichem. That's another form of Chaim, and therefore wherever you meet up with it, Hayim, Chaim. In other words, it's a sort of Chaim that it's always Hayim. It's always a new eternity, a new freshness in the Amidiyus HaChayis of the Neshama. Peledik is that. Shehem B'Chinas Chayis Atzmi. לפי שהם דבקים בהוויה וכינו בבחינת הכלים. As is well known, that the Neshama we pointed out from Pnimis HaKelim, Achamesha Kosa, but Dibur HaMashku, B'yem Simchaschem, Rish Nun Vov, that's the Tishrei. The Tishrei Hemshech of that particular year, Rish Nun Vov. Over there is a long discussion. Upon him in this union of a thing being only a gilui from the etzem, nonetheless it has the mila of chayes kiyum atzmi. Well, that's a good apelatic union ukemuva. Ishamela nimtzela fize that even if we go down into that ha'orofan ihu, we see that ha'orofan ihu is sufficiently ihu and is sufficiently good with the etzem and its etzem with its makablim, which are the fitanius and evarim shebekalim, is sufficient that it mahapach them to be killer, not that it's dependent. They're not dependent anymore. They live in their own way, mitzad their own chayes. What do they need the ganze shlapses from the EU? Well, that causes in them Ayin noisaf of etzem kiyum shalahem. In other words, that's poiling them dvorim nifloim mitzad the or the yichudim or elyonim of mitzad etzem ability of the kelim to be a kiyum, to be in a state of kiyum that they already have mitzad atzmom. Betchilas Kabbalah, when the Etzemina they're makabel from the EU. Ukemoi al der mashal ba'adam lamata. So now we bring a mashal to that whole inyan, even though the mashal sof kol sof is not b'deima to the nimshal. As we'll see, we're bringing a mashal right on the Etzemina. How two things become like mamish one inyan, and one inyan gives into the other one all that it can possibly give, but not necessarily that the results are exactly the same. Okay, al der moshe ba'adam lamato, arei aguf hu chai bi'atzmei, lo rak ma shenimtza boi dova chiyuni, ki im shu atzmei chai, v'lo kemoi alavush, yesha b'shah she'adam lovush boi, arei hu misnaneya, שזהו רק מפני שהאדם החי מלובש בו. אבל בגוף, הרי אין באופן כזה, כי אם שהגוף עצמי חי על ידי הנפש. In other words, here we see that the yichud of the neshama with the guf, despite the fact that the neshama, like we just pointed out, is miyadeh, ma'alosev, erchoi, smam shelakus, and smam pnimis shelakus, and v'shmoi kayam, and kisei nochem, and the whole ariches. Once that neshama enters the dova, nifrad mimenu, nivdal mimenu, that's a guf. I mean, it's well known that there are two opposites of filah. But that's a chiddush nifla, that the very etzem nislavshis can take place. There can be a slavshis of the neshama in הדובר כל כך רוחק ממנו בתכלס ההופכיות כמו הגוף, nonetheless the yichud between them becomes in such a way that the goof, which is prior to that, is lavshes. Yeah, it's a dover grilmi. It's a piece of material zach which doesn't have anything. Right? We see that the Eibushter made the Adam offer minoa adoma. He made him a piece of dust. What the inyan van offer Eibushter is called chayes. It's not misnanei of Eibushter kol inyanim sheish beguf. In other words, legabi, what we understand is a goof. Offer is a dover, and he called a toitazah. That's what the goof returns to. Liachar it is the neshama. Comes again the neshama, and they have to put the neshama into the goof. The goof becomes alive. The goof itself left. So the Rebbe said it's not the taich that the goof remains really what it is. A dover shel meis. A dover she'im b'zeh shum chiyuni is. And what has happened is that there's just a dover b'toich which pushes it around and makes it levadik. Now the etzem goof is mishyachid so much with the neshama that the goof itself is alive. That every ta in the goof is a levadik ta mitzatim kabbalah from the neshama. In other words, it's not that you got one entity and the other entity is making it alive. No, the yichud is so much that the goof becomes a levadik, it becomes alive. Mamish as every day, as every day neshama. And loikemoy alavush. He said, then when you're inside a lavush, then lavush moves around because you're moving around. The lavush is a dover, mace, be'etzemet inyone. When you put the mensch inside his suit, then the suit moves around because he moves around. But the goof is not like that. When you put the neshama in the goof itself becomes a dover chai. The etzem bossa haguf is alive. Aber beguf, he said, Hare eino boifen kozeh, ki im shaguf atzmoi chai alidei never. So he said, beguf, it's gura goyis a chiddush. He said, beguf, hare mitzad atzmoi eino matzias chayuni klal. It should have been really like a lavush, because it's not got any chayas in itself whatsoever. Adrabah, u matzias moves, mitzad atzmoi, kenoida, amavur b'makim, in other words, not only that the goof is not a levadik itzach, but it's a inim from Rachman in Islam, the way it is. It's an inim from Mover. And then we see after the stalkers of the neshama, the goof just, at least depending who you are, the goof begins to deteriorate, but not by those who it's not meant to deteriorate. And never he said that Ayin from Mavis mitzad atzmi kenoida mavur b'mokim acher. Umekol mokim b'slapshus hanefesh boy harihu biatzmei chai. It itself becomes levadik. V'ayinu mitzad isachtas hanefesh boy kol kach b'pchinas pnimiyos. In other words, that the nefesh unites in such a pnimiyos dikha yichud that what causes that the goof itself becomes chai. Hainu b'pchinas Galas, that the way the nefesh enters the body is a complete iskalas. Dahainu, first of all, the nefesh is begolu in the goof. It doesn't become nela, albeit it becomes limited. That we'll see later on, that there are certain limitations which are caused in the nefesh alidei the goof. Oba, the goof remains betachlis ha'isgalas inside the goof, and that is due to the fact that it's bisachtas. It mamish unites with the goof. Even though something that you become mamish one thing with, it can't really be ma'ilum or mastaf, b'yemes or b'shleimas. It can only maybe be magbuli, a certain oifani, gili b'tzad madregis taktoinos. Of in the etzem minion of these scholars, it can't in any way be magbil or a filo. How do you call it? Mafkis. It can't call any pechisas in the union of these scholars because they become in an oifim from dover echod amish. V'aynu mitzad isachtes kolkach aynu b'chinas iskalas u b'chinas ha'is isachtes Ad shaguf atzmei chai. That the guf himself is in the form of a lebedike zach. And therefore, koloid, that the neshama is there, then the guf himself is there. The guf himself is alive. In all the pratim shaboy, including every prat and every eva and every hair and every fingernail, akol bako mikkel, I feel the dvarim aki, taktoinim, all of them are alive. Every even of the guf is a lebedik zach in its own right. But not that the guf becomes a yin for chai mitad atzmai mami. Ad kedek it doesn't become. It becomes chai mitzad yichud with the neshama, and from a dover meis it becomes a dover chai. But not lamay was saying that benagir to the kelim lamayla that they're in for kiyum atzmi. Ad kedek we're not going to taina. But ultimately speaking, there are certain Maimorim considers what they taina that even in a way the guf does become how do you call it, a kiyum Matthias Nitzkias mitzad the neshama. The dafki alidei the slapses to the neshama. I feel when the inif and chas v'shalom misa, nonetheless the guf remains a kli in the cave to tchias hameisim, and the very fact that they can and will be the inif and tchias hameisim in the same guf, in the same inif which was the guf, or that offer will be reshaped by the Evish to be the guf that it was before. V'oid anayla har yosef, not another guf, no their guf was at kaat, but petachis hayofi v'ashleimas, or that's a sign that it's a Matthias Nitzchi itself upon. V'amera ulai yesh lema, that's what the Rebbe's maram is here, that the guf atzmei chai from the neshama. If Amera the neshama is a kiyum atzmi, to a certain extent the guf also becomes ulai loko kak be'riyas Ayin. You don't see it, but it's shy to say that the guf becomes a kiyum atzmi. And Sodom Amar says, but they almost said that being foolish, mitzad the fact that the guf, even if it decays, some lose, down, and I would say by a lot of it doesn't anyway decay, it remains in a form of a kiyum nitzchi. And therefore the Rebbe says, "Adugma mizel lamaylin, lamaylin kelim emchinas kiyum atzmi mitzad ha'ishlapshet, mitzad, and that ishlapshet is yichud. If we say by the Adam lamata, it's his galus and his achtas, then how much more so? Yeah, mayla mitzad ishlapshet so behem shehu b'chidas his achtas mamish. Yeah, ubi emes yichud ha'eres ima kelim. Who Yesha me yichud v'schabes hanishama u'maguf. Oh, we just said. That's all. That's mamish. The kelim laila become mamish a kiyumat. And lamata, there's also a trace of it. There's also a certain amitiyat, but it's not called kach gilun. So we're all there for this evening, due to the fact that it was a little bit of a mile of Teva that Bekladi had this year tonight. I've been in Ira Kodesh Tfas. Moed to Shabbos. I came back this afternoon. This the Hemshech from Teves. I made a whole thing of my son's koilo and a whole series of minyanim. So I have a little bit adequate under the good weather, as they say. So that'll be, as they say, enough for the scene. Does anybody have a telephone? I want to call my taxi to her. Can I use your phone? Could you just tell me the number? I don't know how to use your gadgets. It's 050.
It's going to warm up. What? It's going to warm up. It doesn't have QMAP on it. It doesn't have QMAP. Some telephones.
A lot of people do. They think